Gather round and welcome back to another edition of Todd Talks College Football, and this is going to be the very first Baker Dozen Poll show, folks. That's right, I pulled this out of my 5 thoughts on this week in college football, and we're making its own show because it's too important for me to try to rustle through it early on Saturday or Sunday morning, trying to figure out the ins and outs, why I'm recording the 5 thought video and editing and all that. So we're going to make it its own show. It's going to release here on Tuesdays. It is going to be fantastic. This is the best damn poll you're going to find in the country. It is the Baker's Dozen Poll, and that's right, folks. I'm always right when it comes to this. Although I've been wrong to start the season, I will get back on track, and I promise you, we are going to see great things out of this poll as the season progresses. We had 2 teams fall out of the Week 2 Baker's Dozen Poll, and that is the Florida Gators and the Arizona State Sun Devils. Both of these teams did not have great weekends in their respective games. We do have 2 newcomers into the poll this week, which is going to be exciting news. Both of them from the same state. So we'll see if you can figure it out before we get to it. All right, let's get it started. I am going to go ahead and make a change at the number 1 spot this week's Baker Dozen Poll. Remember, folks, this is a fluent poll. This is not based on what I thought last week. This is based on what I saw this week and taking in consideration what I saw previously out of these teams. So, just because I had someone ranked number 1 last week doesn't mean they're going to stay there. I'm not an AP voter. I don't keep a consistent thing. I jumble around, as you'll see in this poll. Without further ado, let's announce the number 1 team in the country, and it is the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's right, folks. They moved up 2 spots. Remember, I had them 3rd last week in the Baker's Dozen Poll. Not 1st, not 2nd, but 3rd. I wanted to see a couple things in this Grambling game last week. I wanted to see how Julian Sain can spin it down the field, and he showed me how he can do that. I wanted to see a tailback step up and be a leader and be a spark in this tailback room, and I feel like I saw that in Bo Jackson. The future is going to be bright with that kid, so I'm going to go ahead and move the Ohio State Buckeyes up to the number 1 seed in the country this week in the Baker's Dozen Poll. My number 2 team this week in the Baker's Dozen Poll was real close, and I mean a smidgen from taking the number 1 spot from the Ohio State Buckeyes, and that is the Oregon Ducks. That's right, folks. I have the Oregon Ducks moving up 3 spots from last week. They were at number 5. I'm moving them up to number 2. They've had 2 wins. Now, granted, some will say, oh, those teams suck. Well, let me tell you. Montana State was a good football team. They were in the FCS championship game last year, and Oklahoma State is still a Power 4 team, and they stomped this team into literally oblivion there. I don't even know if they've recovered yet there at Oklahoma and Stillwater. They're probably still trying to get out underneath that boot Oregon put on them. So I'm moving Oregon up to the number 2 team in the country, and I almost made them the number 1 team. Penn State is going to come in at number 3. Now, remember, I had them number 1 last week, but, they've had 2 games against lesser competition, and honestly, they really haven't, satisfied my craving for what I thought I was going to see out of Penn State. So I'm going to move them down to number 3. I am going to move a team up 4 spots from last week, and that is the Miami Hurricanes. Somewhat because what they did with Bethune-Cookman, but really more about what other teams did in front of them that I was unsatisfied with. So we're going to go ahead and move the Miami Hurricanes up 4 spots to number 4. They have a very challenging game this week with USF, who did knock the Florida Gators out of my poll last week. So we'll see if they can get through this week and a tough Bulls team. We're going to go to number 5. This team dropped 3 spots for me. I had them number 2 last week, and we're going to talk about the LSU Tigers. That game was less than satisfying for the taste buds of LSU fans. That game was 10-0 late in the 3rd quarter. And honestly, folks, that's not a great Louisiana Tech team that they played. But we'll go ahead and give LSU a little bit of credit. They had a big win, and they kind of were sleepwalking maybe. But maybe that's a sign of things to come. Or maybe it's because Clemson's not that good. Have you noticed I do not have Clemson yet in my top 5? Obviously, they lost last week or against LSU. But they also sleptwalked. So how good was LSU's win against Clemson? Soon, who knows? We'll see. They play the Gators this week, so they could easily jump back up to number 2, although the Gators had a tough loss to USF, who Miami happens to play this week. It's all kind of a chain reaction in a circle, folks, here in college football. All right, let's move to the number 6 team. And this team was unranked. I wanted to see what they were going to do after they had the big win against Alabama. I thought they might sputter around last week with an inferior opponent, but the truth of the matter is, folks, Florida State came out and just put a beat down on the team they were playing, and it was not even funny. So I'm going to go ahead and move Florida State all the way up to number 6. I'll probably regret this pick in 2 weeks, but anyways, we're going to go ahead and give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. They had a good win. They came back, and they thought they would be sloppy last week, and they were not. All right, we're going to drop Georgia down 3 spots to number 7 from last week. Again, Georgia just kind of, I told you in my 5 thoughts on college football this week that this wasn't an impressive performance by any means by Georgia. I'm sure their defense, I'm still trying to see if their defense is any good. Why is Gunnar Stockton throwing the ball so many times against an FCS opponent? I just don't know that Georgia's really a great football team yet. Again, the key word is yet. So I'm going to knock them 3 spots to number 7. We're going to look at the number 8 team in the country, and I thought in the first half they were kind of stifled by Manny Diaz, and that would be the Illinois Fighting Illini. They're going to jump up 2 spots in this poll. They did come back in the second half and just train wreck Duke in that second half, and especially in that fourth quarter. I liked what I saw out of Illinois, especially in the second half. I'm going to move them to number 8. We are going to move to number 9, and this is going to be where the Texas Longhorns fall. This will be the first team in my group here that has a loss. In Texas, yes, they won 38-7 over San Jose State. But honestly, folks, I watched the first half. I told you in my 5 thoughts on this week in college football, I still don't know that I was in love with the performance that they had. Yeah, Arch has a big game, I guess. In some ways, he also looked like he might be a little injured in some ways. So I'm going to move Texas down 2 spots to number 9. For the number 10 team in this week's Baker Dozens poll is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and they have moved up a spot even though they didn't play, but really they moved up because of a couple teams ahead of them, or one team ahead of them that lost, so they just naturally moved up a little bit. I don't know where we're going to see Notre Dame, how we're going to look against Texas A&M this week. It'll be interesting. I can't wait to see that game. I'm hoping, because you remember they were my national championship pick, so I'm hoping they're going to come out and have a big game against Texas A&M, but we'll soon to find out. I am going to move Oklahoma up 2 spots from my 13th spot last week in the Baker's Dozen. That's right, I put them in over top of teams like Tennessee, South Carolina, Missouri, a bunch of other different teams. I put Oklahoma in that 13th spot, and they proved me right last week. John Mateer took care of Michigan, looked pretty decent in a good game. They're going to move them up to number 11. That's a 2-spot jump for Oklahoma. And then we're going to look at the next team that has a loss on this thing. This will be the 3rd team with a loss, and that is the Clemson Tigers. I dropped them 6 spots this week from 6 to 12. This team did not look great against, Troy. That's right, Troy. They were playing Troy, and Troy was up 16-0 against Clemson in the first half, and Clemson really needed to come back. I don't know that Clemson has a good running game here, and it's questionable on how good this team is, although I had really high hopes for them. But we're going to move them all the way down to 12. And now we're going to bring in another unranked team. Obviously, the first unranked team that came into this poll was from the state of Florida, being Florida State. And I told you the 2 unranked teams this week were both from the state of Florida. And we're going to move the USF Bulls up to number 13. And anybody that has them any lower than 13 is just flat out crazy. Quite frankly, they should be higher than this. I don't know why I put them so low, just because I'm a sucker for the other teams, Clemson, Texas, and Notre Dame. But the truth of the matter is USF has the 2 best wins on their resume to date in the country. That's right. The best 2 wins on their resume to date. You know why? Because they're the only team that has beaten two ranked teams in the first 2 weeks. And oh, by the way, they're not ranked anymore. Both those teams are out of the top 25 because what USF did to them. Now, again, they go to Miami this week. Now, we'll see if they can beat the Hurricanes. If they can beat the Hurricanes, folks, I'm telling you what, I'm going to probably put them up in the top 5 and could even be higher. Who knows? All right, that is our Baker's Dozen poll for this week, week 3 of the college football season. And again, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Miami, LSU, FSU, Georgia, Illinois, Texas, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Clemson, and USF round out that Baker's. Let's talk about 5 teams that fell just outside of my Baker's Dozen, folks, but I think they're cooking something up, and they could be in the Baker's Dozen as early as next week, if not maybe within 2 weeks for sure, based on some of the schedules we're going to see. But before we hit that, please remember to like and subscribe to the show. It's very important, trying to build a base here, and we need more people subscribing, more people like, and give me a comment. I know you think I'm probably a fool and an idiot, so give me a comment. Let me know how I'm doing, where I'm wrong, which I'm probably wrong all the time, so give it to me. You know who you are. All right, let's get to this 5 teams that I feel that are cooking something up, and 4 of them could literally do it this week, and that is going to start with the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck. That's right, folks. They went out last week, and yes, they played an inferior opponent, but they played them without their starting quarterback in Haynes King, and this backup kid threw for 300-some yards, passing 3 TDs. They just walloped the team they were playing, and they get to play Clemson this week there in Atlanta. It's going to be a great game for Georgia Tech to make a statement and beat Clemson. And this game could be the end of the road for Dabo Swinney against Georgia Tech. He loses this and starts out 1-2 with a rough game over an inferior opponent in Troy last week. This could be the end-all be-all for Dabo. So we got Georgia Tech sitting outside the Baker's Dozen looking to make a move this week against Clemson. The next team we have just sitting outside the Baker's Dozen is the Tennessee Volunteers, and I didn't have a lot of hope for Tennessee this year. I thought they might be a 7-5, 8-4 at best team, but they look a little different through 2 weeks. We'll see how good that Syracuse win actually was. Syracuse had to really struggle to beat a UConn team. That's pretty good in Mora, but I don't know that Syracuse victory for Tennessee was great. They did come out last week and pummel an inferior opponent. Most points they ever had against a team since the poll started in Tennessee. Guess what? They got Georgia rolling in there to Rocky Top, and they're going to be able to make a statement if they can win that game against the Georgia Bulldogs. The next team I got sitting on the outside looking in, but is getting close to in, is Utah. They've looked really good in the last couple games. So be it against who they played. They've got Wyoming this week on the road. I don't know that that's going to be a real challenge for Utah, but the next week after that, they got Texas Tech, who's another team that's down outside of my 5 here, but still making their way up the seating here in the chart. So I got Utah sitting on the outside trying to get in. Big win over Texas Tech in 2 weeks will be a good launching point to do that. The next team I got sitting just outside is South Carolina. I have not been impressed with South Carolina. Yes, they beat Virginia Tech, but not in the fashion I thought they would. And then we saw Vanderbilt just roll Virginia Tech, especially in the second half. So we don't know if Vanderbilt or South Carolina is better based on the win against Virginia Tech. So the good news is, folks, South Carolina plays Vanderbilt this weekend, so we're going to find out exactly whose win over Virginia Tech was better, and the winner of this game could catapult themselves into the Baker's Dozen, and that includes Vanderbilt, because they'll have 3 decent wins if they can get up into this thing and be 3-0. And the last team in my group of 5 here that hasn't made it into the Baker's Dozen is the Texas A&M Aggies. I'm not sure how good they are yet. I'm still holding judgment. I got them placed here somewhere around 18th. The good news for the Aggies is they get to go to Notre Dame this weekend, and they can prove their point if they can beat Notre Dame that they're one of the top 13 teams in the country. So those are 5 teams that I've got. I'm going to call it cooking something up here and see if they can get in to the top 13 in the Baker's Dozen poll, which again is the only poll that matters here in the college football world because I came up with it, and it's always listen to Todd Day around here all the time. So we're going to go with it, and that's what we're going to do. So I hope you enjoyed the first Baker's Dozen show on the week 3 of the season. This is the first show that it's been its own show. It's been wrapped up into 5 thoughts on this week in college football if you want to go back and watch the preseason poll and then last week's week 2 poll. But this week we're looking at week 3 in its own show, and it's exciting news. So I hope you enjoy it. Remember, like and subscribe and gather around, and always ALTT. We'll see you on Thursday with the weekly predictor show. Some big games coming up.